There's a passage in the Bible that has genuinely confused serious readers for over 2,000 years. Not confused in a "that's a hard teaching" kind of way, confused in a "I don't know what I just read" kind of way. Scholars have written entire books trying to explain it. Ancient Jewish tradition actually restricted who was allowed to read it. You had to be over 30 years old and have a teacher present. Not because the content was inappropriate, because it was considered too disorienting to encounter alone. That passage is the first chapter of Ezekiel. And if you've never read it, or if you read it once and quietly moved on, I want to walk through it with you today. Not to tell you what it means with certainty, because honestly, nobody fully agrees on that, but to actually look at what Ezekiel described, word for word, slowly. Because the description itself is strange enough that it deserves more than a quick skim. Let's get into it. Before we get to what Ezekiel saw, you need to know a little about who he was and where he was when this happened. Ezekiel was a Jewish priest. He was living in Babylon, not by choice. He was part of the group taken into exile when Babylon conquered Jerusalem around 597 BC. So he's not in Israel. He's not near the temple. He's living in a foreign country, far from everything his entire religious life had been built around. And that context matters enormously for understanding what he sees. The vision doesn't happen in Jerusalem. It doesn't happen near the temple, which was the center of Jewish worship. It happens in Babylon, on the bank of a river called the Shabar. He's 30 years old, sitting with a group of other exiles, and then the sky opens. The Book of Ezekiel starts with some of the most carefully detailed, methodically described vision content in the entire Bible. Ezekiel is not vague about what he saw. He doesn't say, "I saw something amazing and indescribable." He tries to describe it, specifically, in detail. And that attempt at specific description is exactly what makes the passage so difficult to process, because the things he describes don't fit neatly into categories we already have. Let's go through this section by section. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4. He says, "I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light." So far, that sounds like a severe weather event, a massive storm system coming from the north. But then he says the center of the storm had the appearance of glowing metal. And out of the center of that, 4 living creatures appeared. Ezekiel describes these creatures in detail. Each one had 4 faces, a human face in the front, a lion's face on the right side, an ox's face on the left side, an eagle's face in the back. Each had 4 wings. 2 wings stretched out, touching the wings of the creatures on either side. 2 wings folded down, covering their bodies. Their legs were straight. He says their feet were like the hooves of a calf, and they gleamed like burnished bronze. Under each wing, on each of their 4 sides, they had human hands. They moved without turning. Whatever direction they went straight. They didn't rotate or pivot. They just moved directly in any direction without turning their bodies. And wherever they moved, fire moved with them. Lightning flashed back and forth between them. Now, I want to stop here for a second, because I know how this sounds. 4 faces, 4 wings, hooves, lightning. It sounds like mythology, like something out of a fantasy novel. But here's what I want you to notice. Ezekiel is not writing mythology. He's not trying to create imagery for effect. He's writing like a man who saw something and is doing his level best to describe it accurately using the vocabulary available to him. He keeps using the phrase "what looked like" or "the appearance of." He's not saying there was a creature with 4 faces. He's saying, "I saw what looked like 4 living creatures, and this is what their appearance was like." That's a careful writer trying to be precise about something he doesn't have precise language for. Keep that in mind as we keep going, because it gets more complex. After describing the 4 creatures, Ezekiel describes something else. Beside each of the 4 creatures, a wheel. And here's where it gets genuinely difficult to picture. He says each wheel appeared to be made of something like chrysolite, a greenish gold translucent stone. And each wheel had a second wheel intersecting it at a right angle. So instead of a single wheel, you're looking at 2 wheels crossed through each other, able to move in any direction without the structure turning. The rims of the wheels were tall, and the rims were covered in eyes. All the way around, on all 4 wheels, eyes. And these wheels moved with the creatures. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures stopped, the wheels stopped. When the creatures rose off the ground, the wheels rose with them. He says, wherever the spirit would go, they would go. The wheels didn't operate independently. They moved in sync with the living creatures, as if the wheels and the creatures were one unified system. I want to be straightforward with you here. Nobody fully agrees on what Ezekiel is describing. There are serious biblical scholars who read this as an elaborate vision of the throne of God, built on earlier imagery from Isaiah and other prophets, a way of describing divine presence in language that was never meant to be literal. There are others who read this as a genuine attempt to describe something Ezekiel actually saw that he didn't have a framework for. And then there are people, and you've probably seen this online, who read Ezekiel 1 and immediately say, that's a spacecraft. Those are wheels with propulsion systems. Those are beings operating some kind of vehicle. That reading has been around longer than the internet. A rabbi named Yosef Blumrich, who was actually a NASA engineer, wrote an entire book in
Under this expanse, the wings of the creatures were spread out, and the sound of them moving was like the sound of rushing water, like the voice of the Almighty, like the sound of an army. Above the expanse, something that looked like a throne, made of what appeared to be sapphire or lapis lazuli, and on the throne, a figure. Ezekiel describes it as having the appearance of a human form. From what looked like the waist up, something like glowing metal surrounded by what looked like fire. From the waist down, also fire. And around the whole thing, a radiance. Like a rainbow on a cloudy day, he says. And then Ezekiel says, this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. 3 layers of qualification in one sentence. The appearance of the likeness of glory. Not this was God. Not this is what God looks like. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory. He's stacking qualifiers because he knows the description is inadequate. He's doing his best with what language allows. And then the text says, when Ezekiel saw this, he fell face down, and he heard a voice speaking. So why does this passage still unsettle people? Why have people been arguing about it for thousands of years? I think there are a few honest reasons. Most Bible passages, even difficult ones, can be placed into a category we already have: a historical account, a poem, a prophecy, a letter. Ezekiel 1 doesn't sit comfortably in any of those. It's written like an eyewitness account, but what it describes doesn't match anything in ordinary human experience. That makes it hard to process cleanly. Your brain wants to file it somewhere and it keeps not fitting. When you read Ezekiel 1 carefully, you have to make a decision about what kind of text you're reading. Is this a literal description? Is this symbolic imagery? Is this a human writer doing his best to translate a genuine experience into words that were never designed for what he's trying to say? How you answer that question determines how you read a lot of other parts of the Bible. Ezekiel 1 makes that question unavoidable. You can't skim past it. Here's what I find most interesting about this passage. Ezekiel was a priest, a trained, educated, serious religious thinker. If anyone had the vocabulary to describe a divine encounter, it was him. And he still couldn't do it without stacking qualifiers and hedging almost every sentence. What did it look like? The appearance of, something like. The passage reads like a man who is acutely aware that his description is falling short and is trying to signal that to the reader at every step. That honesty is actually one of the reasons serious readers find the passage credible. If Ezekiel were making this up for effect, he probably would have made it cleaner, more coherent, more digestible. Instead, it's genuinely difficult, and the difficulty feels like the point. Most people who encounter Ezekiel 1 don't realize it's the opening of a 48-chapter book. The vision isn't the destination, it's the credential. Ezekiel is being commissioned, sent back to the exiles in Babylon with a message they're not going to want to hear. The vision establishes that what follows comes from somewhere beyond ordinary human authority.
If you skip Ezekiel 1 or read it too fast, you lose the foundation the rest of the book is built on. Let me just bring this together simply. Ezekiel 1 is one of the strangest passages in the Bible. That's not an opinion, that's the consensus of thousands of years of readers. What Ezekiel describes, the four creatures, the intersecting wheels, the eyes on the rims, the expanse, the figure on the throne, has never been fully explained to everyone's satisfaction. And I think that's actually the honest place to land. Not, here's the definitive answer, but here is what the text says, here is why it's difficult, and here are the serious questions it raises that haven't been resolved. If you walk away from this video with a clearer picture of what Ezekiel actually described and a better sense of why it still unsettles serious readers, then we did what we came here to do. Before you go, I want to ask you something. After hearing all of that, what's your honest read on Ezekiel 1? Do you think it's symbolic imagery, a genuine attempt to describe something literally seen, something else entirely? There's no right answer I'm looking for. I'm genuinely curious where people land on this. Drop it in the comments below. This is the kind of passage where the conversation in the comments is usually more interesting than anything I could say in the video. If this was useful, if it gave you a clearer picture of one of the most unusual passages in the Bible, hit the like button before you leave. And if you want more of this, slow reads, full context, no skipping the hard parts, subscribe to the channel. We cover stories and passages like this regularly, the ones people have questions about but don't always know where to go to get a straight answer. I'll see you in the next one.